Hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be just a short video, um, pretty much only about just the MBTEK UNI 15 controller and my set points and how I have it set up, and maybe we can share some thoughts about what I know about those different parameters. Uh, so stick around, stay tuned. Sorry, lost the beard. Uh, but it may grow back one of these days. I don't know. Tragic fire accident. But stick around. We're going to talk about the MBTEK UNI 15 TIS Tronics controls, set points, parameters, all that stuff. All right, everyone. I am got this halfway balanced onto a tripod. So some folks had asked, what are my set points? What do I have mine set up for? I would say that you can take these with a grain of salt. We'll kind of go over just navigating menus just in case, because I think there's a few of y'all out there that have some of these. This is the newer style controller that they have. They did have an older style, so I can't speak to those. These instructions primarily are not written in English, and they have an English version, which are okay, but it doesn't really dive into a lot about exactly the ins and outs of this. I'm just going to tell you kind of what I have here. So this is kind of the main screen. If you push the function button, you can just scroll through whatever. I do have an exhaust gas temperature sensor installed. I do not use the domestic water integration. So what I'm using here is that temperature probe that I got with the boiler. I put it on the return to my boiler. So it gives me a set of eyes on what's the supply temperature, what's my return temperature. It does say domestic hot water, but I'm not really using that functionality. So like I said, as you hit the F button, you just toggle through the screens. If you push function and hold it, you'll get into your sub screens. Language settings, restore factory, program version, boiler settings, domestic hot water menu, thermostat menu, user menu. Most of what you're going to be doing, or most of what I'm doing, is in the user menu and boiler settings menu. I'm not using a thermostat to tell this boiler to turn on from some external source. I'm not using domestic hot water integration. I am heating my domestic hot water, but it's not integrated to tell this thing when my domestic water is a certain temperature. But you can use that. So let's scroll up and go to the user menu, and we'll hit yes to go in. So temperature unit, I guess we'll just start here. Sound signal, I have my sound signal off because if it runs out of fuel, it'll have a loss of fuel alarm and the boiler will shut down like it's supposed to, but it'll sit here and just keep beeping. So I have that turned off. Temperature unit, I use Fahrenheit. Maximum ventilator efficiency, 100%. Minimum is 50. I'm going to probably have a separate angle and talk about some of these in particular, but I have mine set to 100. Minimum is set to 50. So this unit has a scavenge mode. So what you're seeing right there is what efficiency do you want it in scavenge mode? And when it's saying ventilator efficiency, in my mind, it's actually should be ventilator output. So maximum ventilator efficiency, that's just output. Minimum ventilator efficiency, this should be minimum ventilator output. That's for the combustion fan. So if it's in scavenge mode, what output do I want going to it? So I currently have that set to 75% output. If it's in a scavenge, how long does it scavenge? I've got it set for 60 seconds. Time between scavenging, I've got it set to 15 minutes. I'm going to do some on-camera talking about ventilator outputs and scavenging. So we talked about sound signal I have off, temperature unit I use in Fahrenheit, and that's pretty much it. If you wanted to change something, obviously, let's say I wanted to change the scavenge time, you would hit yes or enter, and you would adjust it to whatever you wanted. So no backs you out. No is going to back me out again. So now I'm here at the main menu. Like I said, I don't use the thermostat. I don't use the domestic hot water. Let's go into boiler settings. So I'm going to hit yes and go in. Let me start with this. Boiler operating mode. Your three options are standard, Brager expert, Brager expert exhaust. I will tell you what I think I know about these because the manual's a little bit thin on information. I believe so. This boiler is really designed as a batch burner, meaning it's really meant to light. It's going to operate the best and give you the best efficiency when you load it full and you're dumping the storage. So basically, when this thing goes, if you have it in Brager Expert exhaust and start it in that mode, it's going to be targeting an ideal exhaust temperature. Basically, from what I can understand from the manual. But because I don't have, 1,600 gallons of storage currently, I don't run in that mode. But I believe that mode is when it runs, it's not targeting a temperature on the water anymore. It's targeting a flue gas temperature for efficiency. Brager Expert, I've tried this and I'm not really sure how much it's different from the standard mode. It's supposedly supposed to help match the outputs to um, the current load. I've used it and it works fine. I can't really tell much difference between um, the Brager Expert and standard, except for there are times where the standard, when you get back to your set point, the blower's turning off. But there are other times where in Brager Expert mode, like if my set point's like 170, 175, when it gets to 170, whatever the set point, sometimes that blower is still going. It's going past where it is. So I feel like this probably has more of a PID loop, a true PID loop on it. And that, just in case, PID loop stands for proportional. The P is for the P is for proportional, I is for integral, D is for derivative. Those three control parameters, if you have a PID loop, they can potentially tune in real time based off of history. So I don't really use this much. I might get more into it if I need to. Because I'm not batch burning yet, there's going to be some inefficiencies that I just have to accept until I get to where I need to be with water storage, if I ever get there. Taking donations. So I run in standard mode. I'm going to click yes. All right. Boiler slowdown threshold. Like I said, the instructions are what they are. They're not great. but my experience is if that's set to, let's say it's set to 10, that means if my set point is 170 degrees, if it gets to 160 or lower, if it gets to 160 or lower, that's 10 degrees below my set point, then the blower is going to be running at the max output that I told it could run in that previous screen. You remember we had a maximum ventilator efficiency and a minimum ventilator efficiency. If I get beyond 10 degrees or more below set point, the combustion fan is going to be running at whatever output I told it was its max output. And so if you said that I set it to 170 and my threshold is 10, reality, I usually run it at about 11. That means, let me go back to this previous screen. I said my max was the max that blower could run at is 100, and the minimum is 50. So my blower can only run between 100 and 50. So with a slowdown threshold of 111, if I've got it, the set point is 170. Once the boiler leaving temperature gets to 169 or lower, it's going to be running at 100% because I've told it can run at 100. I've said the minimum is 50%. So as the temperature goes down and down and down, the blower is going to be, the combustion fan is going to be speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, speeding up. As the water warms back up, say a cycle of heat starts and the load pull down on the boiler is happening, the leaving supply temperature is going to go down. But as it warms back up, as it goes back up, the blower combustion fan is going to slow down. And it seems I've put a tachometer on the combustion fan, and with fair accuracy, it seems fairly linear. So at if I have it set to 170, at 160, 159, at 159, the blower is going to be at 100, and as it's up to like 169, 169 and a half, approaching shutoff, it'll be at 50% output. So it's going to vary from 100% output to 50% output. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what I'm targeting. Boiler hysteresis, that is set to 1 degree, which means whatever I have it set to, if I've got it set to 170, when it gets 1 degree below my set point. So once it gets to 169, that combustion fan is going to come on at my minimum fan output, which is set to 50. So set point is 170. My hysteresis is 1. When I get to 169, the combustion fan is going to come on, and it'll be at minimum or 50%. The colder it gets, the more it's going to go towards 100. Maximum boiler temperature. This, I really think it should say maximum boiler set point. And I've got that set to 175. Just in case, somebody's in here messing around and hey, watch this, I'm going to push it up. But no one's out here. So the maximum boiler temperature, in my mind, that should be maximum boiler set point. Boiler switch off temperature is 113. Let me hit enter here. I'm going down. 113 is as high as it goes. I don't like that. I need this boiler to shut off well before 113, because if I'm sending 113 degree water out there, and it's trying to heat my water coming back, is going to be way too cold. So I've got that set to 113. Um, I do have an external control that will shut the pump off long time before we get to that. So boiler switch off temperature, set it as high as you can. And at least with this version of software, it's 113 degrees. Pump switch on temperature, meaning when I go from okay, I'm not running right now. It's like 60 degrees here. So uh, when I've got a kindling started, wood starting, hey, I'm ready to start this thing off. I'm gonna hit start, yes, to go. Basically, what temperature do you want this to turn your circulating pump on? Um, uh, 131 is as high as it'll go. So I've got it set to 120. Again, when I start off, I usually will just manually turn a pump on anyway, because I don't want that water to sit there and get hot, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, turn it on and just send that really hot water and get that cold water back all of a sudden. So on a startup, I usually put it manually with other things that I have. But the pump switch on temperature, I've got it set to 120. So no matter what, it's going to try to turn that pump on when the water gets 120. I have other things that won't let it come on if I don't want it to. Ventilator type, this is where you select what type of ventilator you have. You got this WPA 07/DM85. You got a WPA 120/06 DM80. And in speaking with tech support and giving them numbers off of what I have, that's what they told me I had. I will say that none of those numbers match the combustion fan. But it works. It ramps up and ramps down. So that's what I have mine set as. Ignition time, I've got 120 minutes. That's 2 hours. So basically, when I start a fire and get going, this thing's got 2 hours to get it up to temperature, or else it'll fail it. Boiler cooling temperature. Best I can gather from the instructions and the manual, when it's set to 158, that means whatever you have this set to is that temperature or higher. It's going to bring on the pump and not allow the pump to turn off no matter what. Because you do have fuel shortage detection modes that, hey, this thing has been tracking for however long and I'm not bringing my exhaust temperature up. I'm running out of fuel, go into fuel shutdown. And you can turn your pumps off then. But if the water is at that temperature or higher, it's still going to keep your pump on, regardless of whether you told it to turn it off or not. Flue gas temperature sensor is on. It's wired up and installed. Fuel gas shortage detection method. So you have the boiler sensor, meaning the water temperature. You can shut it down based off of the water temperature getting too cold, or you can shut it down by the exhaust gas temperature being below a certain threshold for a certain amount of time. So that's what I use, exhaust gas. And the next thing is exhaust gas temperature for lack of fuel detection. So hit yes for enter. I've got mine set to 194, and 194 is as high as you can set. So when my flue gas temperature gets at 194, it's going to start thinking about shutting down. The next thing is fuel shortage detection time. I've got 40 minutes. So basically, if the flue gas temperature gets to 194 or below for 40 minutes, shut the boiler down, because it's running out of fuel and we want to save as much coals as we can for the next load. All right, so you got to make sure you have the exhaust gas temperature installed. and make sure it's turned on, and say I want to use the exhaust to shut it down. My exhaust gas temperature set point is 194 at 40 minutes. So 194 or lower for 40 minutes solid, go into a shutdown. This says central heating pump off with no fuel. I have it as yes. You can have that yes or no. If you have it as no, it's going to run the pump forever. There could be times where you want that to happen. You may be in a really, really cold environment that you just want to keep the water moving no matter what. Um, I don't do that here. So when this thing gets flue gas low enough for a long enough amount of time, I'm going to shut off on fuel and I'm going to turn the pump off. The next thing is central heating pump off delay, which is 5 minutes. So when I go into like an extinguish mode, like I'm out of fuel, it'll keep that pump on for 5 minutes and then it'll turn off. And we're back to the boiler operating mode. So we can just hit no, back out, back out. So there were a couple things specifically I wanted to touch base on. So maximum efficiency of the blower or combustion fan, minimum efficiency of the blower. Uh, Again, what it's calling efficiency is not like combustion efficiency. It's just, I think it should be called output. Um, so I have my maximum efficiency or output set to 100%, my minimum to 50, and I have an 11-degree slowdown threshold. So how high you run that like output, um, if you start adding a lot of combustion air, yes, it will have the ability to heat, uh, and it's going to get hot, and you can also be wasting energy. Um, the idea is you want the flue gases hot enough, and you want the fire hot enough to try to keep creosote from forming. But you if you're like dumping out 500-degree exhaust air or 550-degree exhaust air, yeah, it's hot. It's hot. That's great. But there's a lot of heat you're sending out the stack too. So kind of keep that in mind. Every house is different. You may be, if you have one of these, you may be running into a like a masonry chimney that may be 25 feet tall or 30 feet high. Everybody's house is different. You kind of the things that I would say to kind of keep in your mind is if you can keep that combustion gas, that gas leaving the boiler 250 and above, you're typically going to be in the clear for uh, not really forming creosote, assuming you're burning dry wood. Um, Mine typically in a burn, if I and the colder it is outside, the better it is for me. Where I'm at, I'm in North Carolina. Um, if it's like 50, 55 outside, there's not really enough load for this boiler, and it just sits there, wants to just cycle down, cycle down, cycle down, and it's not having to light off and burn very often. So it just makes it a pain for soot formation and potentially creosote if it's just cycling. So I really 45 and under for my house. At 45, I'm turning the heat on in the building too to give it extra load. But for your minimum and maximum efficiencies, what the controller is calling efficiency for your combustion fan, really your minimum and maximum output to your combustion fan, you want that to be set where if it needs to cycle on, you don't want it to, you don't want to have like a 1 degree hysteresis and your minimum at 80 and your maximum at 100, because as soon as that temperature drops like a degree, it's going to whoa, it's going to come run wild, and it's going to, especially if you got a good load of wood in there, it's going to overshoot bad, and it's going to get real hot, but then it'll get too hot and it'll just sit there. It's short cycle, short cycle, short cycle. So like I said, I typically do 11-degree slow down threshold and a 1 degree hysteresis. So that's basically 1 degree below set point. Like I said, when the heat for the house comes on or somebody starts taking a shower, that water temperature is going to start falling. And it don't take long. There's only about 20 gallons in there. 4 or 5 minutes, less than 4 minutes, that water temperature is starting to drop in the boiler to the point where the discharge is starting to come down. And it'll come on and we'll sit there at minimum within 30, 40 seconds, the at minimum of that combustion fan will start to bring up the flue gas temperature. And if under normal circumstances, it doesn't ever get to 100 output. It'll get to 100 output when I'm kind of getting near the tail end of the fuel. Like I said, when I'm starting to get low on fuel sometime in the middle of the night, and I've watched it, in the daytime just to kind of just verify with my own eyes what's happening. If I'm starting to get low on fuel, there's not as much burning wood in there, and there's a good coal bed, but it's still not as much capacity because it's spent, it's fuel, a lot of it, and you'll start to see that water temperature of the boiler starts to drop, Okay, come on at minimum. Okay, go ahead and go to 60, 70. You end up at 100%. It's got to get all the way to 100% to just get the water temperature back up again. But that's normally only around where you're really starting to get towards the tail end of your fuel charge. So some things to think about, like I said, sitting there at 500 degrees coming out the flue pipe, you're wasting fuel. Yeah, you'll heat water really, really, really good. But a lot of your heat's going out the flue pipe. Uh, I A good rule of thumb, and we use this in commercial boilers too. What is your combustion air temperature? I mean, if it's 70 degrees in here and it's burning at a decent rate, 200, 225 degrees above that. So, if you start getting to 300 degrees above what your combustion air temperature is, you're looking at um, typically an excess oxygen situation. You're overfiring it, and you're not necessarily getting the gains. So it's a dance. Wood fuel. I mean, I can't. Let me turn the wood off. No, wood is trying to burn and it's sitting there smoldering if I'm not giving it enough oxygen. So, uh, with a gaseous fuel or liquid fuel, you can regulate that a lot better. So it's a dance. It's hard to get it exactly right all the time because the load's different. But some things to think about. Normally when I'm burning, I will stay 280 to 320, and that seems to work pretty good. It keeps the boiler fairly clean. I mean, you're gonna get some creosote, especially if in my situation, if I lived in Maine or you know a really cold environment, I'd have a bigger boiler, by the way, and I'd always have a decent load for it to stay on. My house, like I said, is at 20 degrees outside. It needs like 34,000 BTUs an hour. That's just above idle for this. So, hope that helps.